if you're a business and you are not fintech enabled and you're not doing fintech stuff, whether this is crypto or AI or whatever, you're going to lose to the competitor.
And he said, I want every government employee to have 1 billion agents. He didn't say 50 or 100, he said 1 billion agents.
Well, now the question is though, what's going to happen for returns if everyone has the same information?
All right, catwalk boys. Here we go.
Okay.
They went with awkward silence. I like it.
Completely normal. That's how we all come, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Violin like that. Great.
Oh, yeah, sit down.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for doing this. I really appreciate it. To start with, can you guys introduce yourselves? Why don't we start over here on the left?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brian Benson. I'm the CEO of Aurum. I come from a traditional finance background many years ago, Morgan Stanley. I was a managing director at Binance for a few years there in the late 19s, early 2020s. And now I'm here building AI finance stack. So pretty excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm Toby. We run a venture fund called TBV. I've been doing this since 2017 across multiple different venture funds. I think we backed now over 200 companies in total. Always been very much on the early side of investing, like pre-seed and seed. And glad to be back in Hong Kong with an industry legend and another good-looking industry legend. Not that he's not good-looking, but he's the American guy between us. That's how he looked like. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my name is Yat. I'm chairman, co-founder of Animoca Brands. We're known to be an investor. We have today over 628 portfolio companies, but really we cut our roots in the space really with, I guess, blockchain gaming, sort of metaverse, NFTs back in 2017, starting with CryptoKitties. But today, of course, our portfolio spans across all sorts of industries, everything related to basically digital property rights and token economies.
Very nice. All right, well, you three gentlemen are exactly who I want to talk to because we're going to be talking about, drumroll, AI. Now, obviously, AI is one of the biggest buzzwords. If you go to conferences, you see it everywhere on everything, in and outside of crypto. To start with, just a general question, is it just a buzzword? Are people overestimating it or underestimating it? Just your high-level thoughts on AI in general. And I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think broadly speaking, I think people are completely underestimating the potential for AI. I think one of the problems that people have with AI is that they're still using it like search. They go to a place, they request it. It's basically become a quasi interface to have an optimized search experience, right? To look for something. But if you look at what happened recently with OpenClaw, and when you look at basically sort of everyone talks about sort of an agentic AI future, but really I think people are beginning to truly visualize it. All sorts of problems with OpenClaw, no question, right? However, the sort of idea of what's now possible to have an AI really function in your life and actually push information to you as opposed to pull, as what we're currently doing, is the part that most people don't comprehend. And outside of the fear mongering and some of the concerns that's out there, it's a classic case of people not understanding it, not actually engaging in it, or in an interface that's unfamiliar with them. And I think, similar case for crypto, there's a lot of very practical use cases that are critical. That's why we think it's inevitable. But again, it's not the use case that's the question. It's the unfamiliarity of how to do it, because we've been always used for so long to do certain things, right? At Animoca, we just launched Animoca Minds, which is basically an agentic sort of service very similar to OpenClaw, except it's entirely cloud-based, not based on Claw. And again, we think this is also a path to mass adoption into crypto because they can handle your wallets, they can basically do things for you. It's an interface that we're accustomed to from a language perspective, rather than dealing with a MetaMask wallet, for instance, which is not hard to use, but again, just unfamiliar.
Well, my mom is not going to be using a MetaMask wallet.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else want to? So Yacht says underestimating. What say you, gentlemen?
Well, I have kind of two takes on this. I think right now it's being leveraged in a way to maximize marketing potential. And I think it reminds me a lot of the .com days when I was getting out of university in California. you saw all these, .com companies and search and all these things, and not that many of them lasted. But in the early 2000s, you saw, the Googles and some of the most powerful, tech companies that we've ever seen on this planet, right? And so I think there's a little bit of that going on in AI, but I totally agree with Yad. I think that it's being completely underestimated. And I think it's actually going to change how humanity interacts with information and data and all sorts of other things. And, one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, because I have a long finance background, is how it's going to interact with finance. And not only for, the hedge funds and, Larry Fink's going to be okay. But I think...
Not sure about that.
Yeah, how it's going to interact with everyday people, right? Like my mom, your mom, and the people around us that we care about that maybe aren't that technically sophisticated, don't have, all the funds in the world to throw at it. How does AI help normal people with finance? To me, that's like the number one question. I've been in crypto since 2017, and that, and at Binance, our motto is freedom of money, right? And so I've thought about that a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And now I'm thinking about that in terms of AI, and I don't have all the answers and I haven't solved it yet, but that's really, to me, what the most interesting thing about it is. And I think it's absolutely being underestimated, but over leveraged on sort of the marketing side. That's my take.
I think a lot of people don't understand the impact that AI has, right? There's obviously two sides, right? There's the retail side and there's the institutional side. Yeah. So if you look at the retail side first, they're predominantly they're using AI kind of like Google, right? It's like they write in ChatGPT what they would ask Google. How is the weather tomorrow? Where can I buy this? Where should I visit sites in Hong Kong? And that's sort of the majority of people that are using it. Now,
that was a slide against me. That's I used that today. Sorry, continue.
And there's nothing wrong about it, right? There's nothing wrong about it. And I think it definitely is an improvement because it gives you a much more detail and it learns obviously with all the things that you want and do and stuff like this. But there is an incredible potential to it that's already possible in terms of building workflows, right? I think most of the sort of retail millionaires that are going to be made are people that are going to find a certain thing that they can automate with AI, right? And not necessarily from a money perspective, that the millionaire or not doesn't really matter, but like it gives people an opportunity to build something and be creative on something where they don't need any starting capital to do so. And then if you look at the institutional side of things, that will be very, very interesting, especially going into, the finance side you mentioned, because eventually, in my opinion, there will be, obviously there's an agentic framework, right? There's the bots, the AI bots that will eventually do that. And especially in trading, in finance, you will have almost an army of different agents that are going to be competing with each other, right? And humans are more the controlling sort of setup side versus like the managing part of it. But the workforce, the organizations in itself will be more or less fully built on AI, right? And I think that's a tremendous impact because again, it decreases your capital requirements, it decreases, any efficiencies, and it makes things a lot more scalable. Now the question is though, what's going to happen for returns if everyone has the same information about something?
Yeah, that was
right. That's just the finance side. Obviously, there's multiple different things, but I think, I think it's vastly underestimated because a lot of people cannot imagine and understand at the scale AI is growing, what that would impact in a short period of time.
So everyone here pretty much agrees people are underestimating the potential for AI. All right, so let's talk specifically about finance, AI finance. Toby, you were talking about it from kind of two perspectives, retail and institutional. So I wonder if that's a good framework to talk about AI finance. But what exactly does that mean to you all? What is AI finance? Is it? I mean, I see this in like wallet apps now with AI. Is that what AI finance is? I'm just kind of trying to get my head around exactly how you think of this topic.
Maybe I can kick it off. My framing around sort of what's happening with blockchain as well, which is sort of adjacent to this, is that we're moving away from a world where there's going to be this construct where finance is a thing. meaning that finance is everywhere anyway. And in a way it is, but most people aren't financially literate. So they are left out of that world, which is why we have problems right now, because you have the part of the world that is financially literate, which is typically the 1 to 5 percentile, and the rest of the world that's not financially literate, doesn't know how to invest, doesn't have a portfolio, never had access to it, and they've basically been left out. It was only 30, 40 years ago where we had this thing called digital literacy, the people who understood the internet and the people who didn't, right? And the ones who did understand the internet had advantages, right? They were the ones who disrupted media, they disrupted information. Information was exclusive for a while. I mean, I grew up at a time when I had to get knowledge from a newspaper and an Encyclopedia Britannica, which of course is all gone, right? And we completely democratized access to knowledge and information, which created a level playing field on that level. So how do we create a level playing field on finance? That's basically where agents come in. How to create access to this is where tokens and crypto comes in. Combine the two together, essentially you have a future where I think financial literacy will ultimately become a thing of the past, hopefully. And that's also our thinking around how the whole world is going to be fintech enabled, in the sense that there's no longer going to be a fintech category. If you're a business and you are not fintech enabled, and you're not doing fintech stuff, whether this is crypto or AI or whatever, you're going to lose to the competitor who is, because they can leverage better, they can finance better, they can do stuff, they can have larger markets, and they will win and you will lose, right? And that's basically the same with someone who was digital literate as a business, or social media literate, or they knew how to use Facebook, or they knew how to use TikTok, whatever, right? They had an advantage. So I think that's kind of where it's going. So it's not so much a distinction between, I think, the categories. I think they're all merging together. And we used to have, very specialized skills. And what we see with AI is you can be a generalist broadly on the idea, and then basically the AI executes it for you. And now someone can vibe code some interesting stuff without actually having to really sort of know how to code properly. They need to know the principles, but they don't have to be the best programmer in the world. It's kind of like in the early days when the calculator was not allowed in school. And then finally it was. I'm old enough to say that I had a time where I wasn't allowed to use a calculator in school. And now because of that, we're all basically mathematicians, as it were. And it opened up the whole world. Whereas before, only if you were good at math could you have certain type of jobs, right? And so AI basically just simply accelerates this at a massive level. And so what is special to us as humans is the ability to distill, basically information and put them together in a kind of conscious way, because we haven't hit AGI yet. I'm a little bit of a critic about sort of some people saying AGI will happen very soon. I don't believe that, but that's maybe a different topic. I think this is the part where we as humans have this advantage, where we have the ability to connect the dots. We have the ability to have this kind of ingenuity that brings it all together.
So if I were to paraphrase, then it would be like AI finance is not, it's like redundant. It would just be finance. AI is going to be kind of central to finance.
And AI is everywhere anyway, right? It's going to be core to everything that we do at the back end. And finance could be something that's related to that, but it's not going to be separate categories in and of itself.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I just wanted to echo what you said in terms of access, because I think that's some of the biggest advantages of AI. Thinking just like from a VC standpoint that kind of goes in this whole thing as well, is let's say in 2017, 2018, in this sort of era, I had a lot of calls and people were like, we're raising because we need to build a dev team that can then build the product. I haven't heard this in a long time. Everybody has a product. Might not be a very good product. It might not be like the best product, might not be fully finished, but like people can code it now. And I don't need to hire a developer that costs a lot of money, or like a front end, back end, design, all these different things. And then when you think, and even a step back, is like how many ideas get killed in the backyard, right? Because people say like, oh, it's too hard to execute. I don't have the money, right? It's probably going to be expensive. Now you have a lot more innovation that's easy to access, right? Will have an impact on finance, because now I think it's going to be harder and harder for these big companies to rely on we are big and we cannot fail, right? Because it was so much easier to build innovations and so many people have great ideas. And sort of that access type of thing is great for like obviously the disruption side of things, but then also from a customer perspective, I think AI makes things accessible for everything, because you don't need to understand everything anymore. It's not complicated anymore. You can ask, right? Stuff will happen for you. You just have to give it the right parameters of what you want in a simple way. And how digital gave product access. I mean, how many people now can basically book a Grab, right? You don't have to go to the taxi station, you just do it from home. So like now this got millions of users, and the same thing is what AI will enable. Have another wave of people coming into this world of digital, of finance, that didn't have access before.
Maybe I just want to echo one additional point around when you talk about the finance rails. This is why blockchain is so critical, because now you have an infrastructure that an AI can trust, that is essentially in a decentralized manner where I don't need permission from an API, contact a bank, access into my PayPal, that kind of stuff. I can do everything on chain with an asset class that I can verify on smart contract to ensure that there's no counterparty risk. And I can do that at scale. And speaking of essentially the amateurization of coding, you have a public infrastructure rail that is now basically banking grade, whether it's an L1 or L2. Call it Ethereum, or take Polymarket as an example. Polymarket would not have been able to be built at its cost and its speed if it wasn't built on basically Polygon. Value sort of capture aside, it's because there's a blockchain infrastructure that basically someone can just build on top, doesn't have to worry about custody of assets, doesn't have to worry about basically all the security procedures. If you had to recreate Polymarket without blockchain, you'd need a database engineer, you need someone how to do OLTP transactions, you do all that kind of stuff, right? That essentially is like building a mini Goldman Sachs, because you're dealing with real money, right? And now blockchain does all of this for you. So now this is possible with Polymarket. Now imagine an agentic future with agentic commerce. How do I ensure that these transactions can be safe? Blockchain solves it. And so they don't have to deal with that anymore. They can just basically scale that. And the developers who are basically building AI agents also don't have to say, well, how do I deal with the security parameters? And so it's much faster. And of course, you got your 16-year-old kid basically building some kind of finance application that sounds like crazy, because he doesn't have to worry about that stuff, because he can really just ideate.
It's kind of like building the front end versus the back end.
Correct.
No, I love this. I'm just soaking it all up over here. So. but I really like, I was in the same boat as Yat, where when I was a kid, we couldn't use calculators, and I had to pull out the P book to find the population of Peru or something, and now the way I think about it is the Internet of Information. And so I was there, at the early days of the Internet of Information. When I got to university, no one had email addresses except the IT students, right? And today, think about it, like everyone has even way better than email, right? And the exact progression that you just mentioned is very important into the Internet of Value, right? So now we have these rails where we can actually program things on them, and we have security, we have finality, we have, limitation of counterparty risk, all excellent points. But I think the next sort of evolution of the internet is the most interesting one, because it's probably going to be the biggest and most important and change humanity in the most ways, right? And I don't even know what to call it, like AI internet or like whatever. And so, and I agree with everything that's been said here. There's going to be all sorts of, it's just going to be the world, right? And we're going to interact with it in the way that we want to. And I don't think it's going to be AI finance per se, but I think there's going to be certain companies that focus on certain parts of this, right? And certain parts of the way that we access this technology. And so, at Aurum, we're focused on the AI finance side of it, but it will blend together with everything. And so your ride hail app and your movie, ticket app and your airline ticket app will all be part of the same thing. And you'll just be able to sort of give it intent and say, hey, I want to travel next spring for the cheapest price to the Maldives, right? And then eventually you'll have it doing things for you, right? And so, but the part that's really interesting to me, from my finance background, from, my work at Binance in the early days, is that how do we do a couple different things today with AI finance, right?
Can you please give me some examples?
Yeah, well, like he said, like how do we, get education on finance, financial literacy up to par to where it's not 5% of the population, it's 70% of the population, right? And the other 30, it's because they don't want to. Because most people in the world now have access to a telephone and have access to the internet. Not everyone, I think it's 80, 90%, I don't know the exact numbers. But to me, that's like the sort of the entryway, the gateway drug, if you will, right? Like people will say, okay, I really want to invest in low risk things and I want to try and make 3%, right? But I think there's a level beyond that has already been used by hedge funds, has already been used on Wall Street and, some of the, the top financial centers in Hong Kong, Singapore, wherever, to where they're doing trades, using this technology, and they have an advantage from a speed, from a latency standpoint on other traders, right? And I think the real interesting question someone talked about either before the cameras were rolling is what happens when all the agents are trading against one another.
Our next question.
And it's a zero-sum game at the end of the day for trading, right? So I think the evolution of this is going to be particularly interesting, because then once all the agents are trading against each other and everything's there, then what comes on top of that and what's next, right? And the key question there to me is
Answer the question, what's next? I want to know.
Well, I don't know. My crystal ball doesn't work like it used to, but
I want to know what happens when humans are kind of out of the loop in terms of the actual execution, and maybe more in strategy. What happens when it's just AI agents fighting?
Well, I think then, like he said, we still are not very close to AGI, and so it's intent and it's strategy and it's who can build the best widget at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, also, and just to complement this, I think it's also about the intent of the human behind it, what they want. I mean, for instance, the best strategies typically have always been being long on something, right? Not everyone's a trader in real life, and not everyone's going to be a trader just because of an agent who can trade for you, right? So it's much easier and safer for some people to say, I believe in this, there's a fundamental behind this. There are still fundamentals in stocks where you can say, you know what, I'm long on this, I don't have to worry about this, I just sit on this. I mean, yes, crypto is full of people who are sort of, trading with leverage and perps and that kind of stuff, No. Yeah, my goodness, right? But that is a small subset of the world, right? I think we just need to understand that crypto is still a small subset, and they're basically, let's call it the more degen expression of Wall Street, right? So they are basically just people who are there mostly for the money, but the vast majority of the world doesn't operate this way. The vast majority of the world wants to basically have a reasonable yield, wants to have a safe income. Money is not their purpose. Money is a means to an end that is more valuable to them. A good life, happy life, good family, whatever, time, pleasure, enjoyment, entertainment, right? Just broadly happiness, right? I think that's kind of where they're driven to. And for them, an AI agent will take care of that stuff. What is a good investment? One of the things that happens, just to tie it into the tokenized aspect, which then agents can sort of purchase, Franklin Templeton, when they started basically tokenizing their funds, what they were able to do was they were able to take $500, something that they would have to minimum sell for $500, down to $20. Now, think about what is the average savings that most, let's call it low or middle income people have, maybe thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of dollars. $500 is too much, right? But if I could invest in the same product that a millionaire can invest in, but for only $20, you're already participating in the same wealth category as that person, right? But he wouldn't know what to buy, and the AI agent can support that, right? So I think there's this one part. I think, the other thing that we at least foresee is, I don't know what the term would be, but we could call it the agentic web. And the agentic web is interesting because things like advertising are completely going to die, at least the way that we see it today. Right now, already one layer beyond, because if you think about what is the sort of, internet commerce, it's not sort of eBay or Amazon. That to us is not internet commerce. It's still commerce, but it's still with physical items just using as abstraction. Internet commerce is advertising. It's our attention, right? And that's over $800 billion a year, moving to $1 trillion a year. It's why Google, Facebook, those guys are generating the kind of money that they have. That's the commerce part. That's all going to get ripped away. Because when you're a user and an agent pushes you information, then why do I need to go to a place where I see a website? And you can see right now, all the media sites are already complaining about, I'm having less clicks because when I'm going to Google, Gemini gives you a summary, and that's enough for me. But of course, Google benefits for now because they're capturing that. When the agent starts coming through in the middle, then there's another problem, right? And so what that means is that, in an agentic web, there's going to be a new kind of economy in the back, and that's going to be what we think of an API economy. But actually what's really happening is we're basically trading value for data, for information that the AI agent will receive and then package together. What OpenClaw is now doing is it's scraping information over the web. A lot of AI agents are doing this. The next defense is websites are going to basically all block it. But this is the classic story, right? They're going to say, we don't want this, you're taking our data, all that kind of stuff, right? And so to be reliable, they're going to be opening up these gateways on the back. It's probably going to be a token economy. They're going to be trading basically value that way. And so we will no longer be interfacing with the website as we see it. We're basically just going to receive from the AI agent, and payment rails happen on the back. And the entire advertising industry, the attention economy, is going to sort of disrupt on that basis, right? So that's at least our thesis. And we think a lot of things will be better as a result of it, because of course you can draw specific data from other areas, because there are things that we generate that has value. This has always been our thesis around, our health data is important, our user profile as data is important, all this information is valuable, but it's been farmed by the platforms. And now we can actually monetize that through an agentic web.
And I think which is one thing to add here, and I think it's going to be very interesting, because when you train agents, that a certain thing has value to you, right? And when the agents then go and basically scrape all that data and interact with each other and basically paying for information versus access, then your search result will be very different than mine, because I will attach a different value to this kind of information that the agent learns over time compared to you.
I mean, we see this with art.
Correct.
We see this with all cultural artifacts that have high value, but again, it's to our personal preferences that also then speak to the communities that we want to attach ourselves to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to derail this, but there is an aspect in media and the creator side where we are absolutely wrestling with this. And just slight take on my take is, I think there's going to be a lag effect where the AI is scraping all this stuff, right? Which is going to put a lot of creators out of business, right? But then they're not going to have anything to scrape. And so there's going to be a dearth of information for a while. And then at some point that will create a scarcity where then those creators will have to be paid again. And so there's going to be I think there's going to be a speed bump here.
So I think
from the creator side.
I actually think, and I'm hoping it's going to be more of a sort of legal approach, in the same way that YouTube basically has to create content ID in order to pay its creators for content. Because if you think about it, YouTube was the biggest pirate in the world. And then basically all the musicians ended up going and saying, hey, this is not cool, right? Yeah. And instead of going the Napster way, they basically came to a compromise. They were sharing revenue with Content ID. And then Spotify and all these guys basically emulated a model version of that. But because they captured all the values centrally, they ended up basically dominating the space, and then they ended up setting the price, right? Yeah. So they became a monopoly, and that actually became a negative. But that was the promise at the time. And I think with an agentic sort of web, we have a way now where basically you can now bargain directly with your data and basically exchange value, where other platforms can come and say, I'll pay you this for your data, right? So when you think about how sort of an AI platform can succeed against another, if it is in a position where it's able to negotiate real-time better prices for your data, you might be willing to do more business with this one versus another one, because it's now all happening on the back, right? And a lot of people are saying, for LLMs, we've kind of hit a bit of a limit because the text-based word has been 99% indexed. But when you look at what's happening with world models, basically the whole world is still up for tagging. What's in the home, what's in the environment, what's happening in your life. Sort of there's a lot more to be tagged. There's a lot more information and data that is intentional than just the written word.
Well, also, I mean, also just the data sets, they found that just ingesting everything doesn't necessarily make the model better, right?
Well,
high quality data is becoming more important.
Yeah, and that's
right?
the weakness of the LLMs, right? Because they can predict the next word, but if there's a lot of garbage in the word,
garbage in, garbage out,
exactly.
garbage out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned centralization, which is, I think, a major concern around AI in general, but specifically going to AI finance. Do you think that it's going to be very centralizing? As AI becomes more and more embedded in everything, it feels like that's a direction it's going towards. Or is there a way that it can get decentralized? Obviously, this is important for people who are in crypto. Right? This is obviously a big concern. So
I think that's a tricky answer, because I think regulation is going to have a lot to do with that, right? Because how is AI going to be regulated? Look at how crypto is attempted to be regulated. From the early days until today, it's changed quite a lot. And I think, back in my early days in crypto, there was no regulation really. It was just a wild, wild west, and it feels sort of the same in AI to me right now. But I think, in my opinion, the key is to regulate the models, not regulate the models, but regulate the outcomes, and what the product of that is, right? So whether it's finance or any other part of the business, marketing is a great example of that, right? I don't think the front end regulation is going to be good for innovation. And I think if we can have sandboxes and if we can have creative ways to drive sort of the growth in this, I think that's the most important thing that we can learn from crypto, actually, right? And we have to bring that into AI. And I don't know if the regulators, like one of the things I've seen Animoca do really well, and we were at the Satoshi Roundtable, didn't get a chance to say hello to you, but I saw you walking by over there, but is this whole idea of digital IDs, right? And how that will follow you around and how that will impact what you do with AI, and whether a ID is a bot or an agent or a person, and how these things are regulated. It's fascinating to me because I was smack dab in the middle of crypto regulation for 4 or 5, 6 years there. And now I see the same sort of parallel, but this one seems even bigger and more complex to figure out. So I'd love to get your take on that.
I mean, the reason we focus on digital ID is because we also foresaw that there's going to be an issue with these agents coming out. And just a funny sidebar story. So when we launched Animoca Minds, which is just very recently, Alan from our office basically had his AI sort of send me updates. And then what happened was that the AI basically gave feedback. And then Alan was talking to me and saying, so you spoke to my AI? Said, we call them minds, so my mind. I'm like, no, I've never spoke to him. It's like, that's weird. Because he said he spoke to Yatsu. And so it turned out that someone else set up a Yatsu mind that wasn't me. And the AI couldn't tell the difference between the real me and the fake me because as far as I'm concerned, it's just another name, right?
Yeah, like a handle, right?
And so it illustrated perfectly why you need to have essentially sort of digital IDs to verify that. Also to verify whether I attest it. So maybe it's not my name, but I'm responsible for it. That means your AI agent can trust that because it's Yat's AI, that at least I'm ultimately accountable for what happens at the end, as opposed to some random agent that's out there, right? And there's all these lessons from crypto because all these anonymous wallet guys that are out there basically just extracting from the network, and you realize that's not good. So you want to just airdrop to people who are actually sort of providing real value. How you do this, basically through an ID system that's already KYC'd. On top of that, you're basically building sort of, the reputation stack. But just to sort of maybe address the question on sort of decentralized versus centralized. Similar to crypto, I think the experience that we've seen is that most people don't care if it's centralized or decentralized because it's convenience and it's cost, which is sad for the decentralized purpose because decentralization is inherently more expensive. In the same way that democracy is more expensive than, a sort of the despotic tyranny.
Yeah, totalitarian
state. Because someone says, let's do this, and you do this, as opposed to having checks and balances and process and all that kind of stuff.
Messy.
Yes. However, there is a benefit for essentially a more democratic, decentralized structure, which is you have safety and you have a sovereign nature. So that means that certain businesses will always pay a premium for sovereign and for security for that reason. In the same way that a totalitarian country has a discount on their market value of whatever they do, and a democracy has typically a premium relative to that because you know that if there's someone going to change the system, that there are checks and balances and systems and that kind of stuff, and that's why decentralization matters. So there will be, for instance, whether it's a sovereign nation or whether it's a company dealing with very valuable assets, they will going to much more prefer to deal with an AI stack that is decentralized, even if it costs them more, because the value of the assets they're maintaining or pertaining to are going to be significantly more expensive. And when you think about what's happening with data today, which really people weren't able to sort of understand fully until it's too late. Europe is unfortunately a good example of that. Europe has been completely digitally colonized. Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they own Europe.
Yeah.
So
they own nothing too.
Yes.
There's none of the AI or none of the companies are.
Yeah, exactly. The Spotify. Okay, sure, right. But they don't have anything against those companies, and so the issue is that the data is now controlled and the influence is now controlled by companies who have who do not have the interests of Europe in mind or whatever particular sovereign state. It's actually a really big national security concern. Right, and so when you look at what Korea has done and what China has done, initially there was criticisms, but actually, from a national security standpoint, from a safety standpoint, when Facebook can shut off newspapers and media in Canada and Australia, you ask the question, well, how is democracy under threat, right? So from AI, people are seeing this much more because it's much more apparent. They're seeing the lessons. So this idea of having sovereign state, for instance, data that's managed for AI will become more important. Now, some countries will lag behind, and unfortunately, they're going to get colonized. And the other ones who are going to understand this, they're going to basically create perimeters to say the data has to be here, or it has to be managed in a certain way, or if it's a decentralized stack, they're going to be comfortable with it because they know that it can't be usurped.
Very cool. I have one more question, but any responses before that?
I mean, I very much agree, and I think the main part why people will understand that it's more important with AI, it's because I think a lot of people understand at this point now that AI will be, it could potentially be a threat for a lot of stuff that's happening, right? And there's all these talks, of course, but I think also the politics understand that will spin out of control very, very fast, because it's every single day this technology is not improving like this, it's going exponential.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with this magnitude, it's kind of the same as democracy versus dictatorship, let's call it like that. It's like a lot of people have realized, okay, dictatorship is not good. Personal harm, news, we need democracy in most parts of the world. And the same thing is with AI, right? It's growing so fast, it's so impactful, it's so significant. This cannot become a dictatorship. This needs to be some sort of democratized. And I think, and I hope that this message gets through, because a lot of, big minds in the space are saying that every single day. And a lot of people are, I'm not sure if they understand the impact of AI to that level.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Brian, anything? No?
No, I mean, I'm just curious Yat's take on regulation as it relates to this, because it seems like, there are certain jurisdictions that are getting it better than others. How do you see regulation on AI, particularly as it relates to money? As it relates to my Facebook posts and these things, I think it's a little bit less critical. It's important, but how do you see regulation coming into this, or being developed or being built?
I think right now it's super early, as you well know, right? But I think where regulation is going to go is essentially the same way we think. It's going to go the same way in terms of like how you have ownership of a car or ownership of a plane, and you're the pilot. If you give it to someone else to pilot and it basically crashes, then ultimately the accountability will go to the owner of that AI. So an AI isn't fully conscious, right? And it's kind of this, basically it emulates and simulates that. But the reality is that someone is giving instructions. I mean, what we see with Moltbook, for instance, everyone's like, oh my goodness, Christopherianism, everyone's basically creating religions. But actually, it turns out there was humans in the back basically sort of doing sort of the Wizard of Oz thing.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and of course, if you're in the industry, you would know that. And externally, it's great science fiction material. But ultimately, you have someone who's accountable in the back. So I think similarly to what we see with the conflict between things like Tornado Cash, for instance, versus the developer, which is a development team, which is a controversial topic, of course, because the ones who wrote the software, how accountable are they for what they're doing with those applications? And I think for finance and AI in particular, I think it's much more so. In the internet space, we had basically this area where websites were originally hiding behind this idea of, I'm not responsible for the content. I'm just a hosting provider. Okay, so everyone's posting all sorts of shit, all sorts of nasty stuff, until government said, hold on, okay, you are accountable for this, right? And then you had rules and things like DMCA takedowns and whatever. I think all of that basically will develop as well. But typically, governments are going to be slow to evolve on this, because right now it's also a race, right? So I think places like China, where the whole AI infrastructure and the conversation is much more centralized, it's much more easier to control, whereas the US is frankly more chaotic and growth-oriented that way. But it's also the reason why the US can advance faster, because the US is the kind of place that is accustomed to breaking things, which is not okay to do in other places like China, right? And I think that model will keep clashing with each other, but I think that's the US superpower. I think, and that's frankly why Europe is unfortunately, I hate to pick on Europe, but it's an example of what happens when because it's left behind because of over-regulation, right?
You got to be careful of $30 million France is devoting to.
Oh my goodness! Yes,
coming fast.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, in the States we like to fly the plane while we're building it, so yeah.
Correct. And I do think that is an example of American exceptionalism. I think it's the fact that America can have this complete creative destruction, and somehow the fabric of America remains. This is not true for most countries in the world.
Well, it reminds me a lot of the KYC discussions, right? Because the idea behind KYC is to stop the bad guys doing things, but it really gets in the way a lot of times of normal people doing things. And so I'm wondering if there's ever going to be a day where they're going after the criminals, not just after everyone, and controlling how people access things, right? Because to me, that seems like a little bit of a similar discussion on a philosophical level. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
What do you mean?
Well, like if we could just go after the bad guys that are laundering money instead of having everyone do a certain thing to get into a platform, right? Like if we could just have free access to a platform, and then when someone is actually using it in a wrong way, go directly after them and not limit the access to people around the world that don't have access to these things and are trying to get into it. Like for example, Venezuela or Turkey or Syria. Like there's a lot of really good people in these countries as well, and so to limit them from having an ID because the U.S. government says like it makes no sense to me. I'm curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, first
probably another Pandora's box.
So first of all, I agree with you that that shouldn't be the case. I think digital ID is a potential solve for that because it basically comes down to your sovereign reputation. So if you have a good reputation and you happen to be in Venezuela or in Iran or a place like this, it should be okay to do business with that. However, that stands in the way of politics, right? And so I don't think we can get away from the political angle, right? Because when you're basically sanctioning a country, you're applying pressure to a central power. You're trying to block them. You don't care if he has a good reputation. He could be a Nobel Prize winner. I will not send this person money to whatever place because I'm trying to bring the country to its knees. I'm not caring about the individual. And I think this is the framing of the world that we exist in. And we see this happening in crypto. Everyone's like, Bitcoin sovereign, whatever. And then Trump got into power and everything that happened. And suddenly everything that Trump does to the world affects crypto, right? So you can't get away from it, unfortunately. I think we have to sort of balance around that as we still have governments sort of running the world, which I think will be for a very, very long time.
I agree, but the example you gave is a pretty easy one to get around because it's politics and we have to sort of do what the powers be. But like in Europe and some other, let's call them developed markets, they're blocking a $500 transaction to a crypto exchange.
Yes.
And so this to me, that's like another level below that.
But that to me will be essentially challenged from crypto rails directly. Okay. So basically, I agree with you. But to me, is it really, and it's a question mark, is it really because they're blocking it because it's a suspicious transaction? Or because, some of my own experiences with bank accounts is like, I want to wire out tens of thousands of dollars, not a big amount, relatively speaking, for what I'm trying to do in some cases. And the bank basically sends me a questionnaire, 20 questions, delays, right? And then you ask the question, who benefits from the money just sitting in limbo? So I think there is unfortunately an element around that where there's an abuse of power because the money's held there. Enter stablecoins, right? Or you can basically just transfer it. So many of our portfolio companies who are making investments don't even want it in their cash account. They're just like, send me stablecoins, right?
Almost all of them.
Yeah, exactly. So and so no more bank in the middle, just handle, it's the same. And so I think banks will have to ultimately innovate. It's why they're fighting essentially over the whole yield provisions in the Clarity Act, because they're like, oh my goodness, because they've gotten lazy, right? And now they have to basically innovate to keep their customers if that happens. So I think technology will push that forward, right? I think it's like taxi drivers and Uber as well, right? It's or Airbnb and sort of hotels. I mean, you'll see that the innovation will come. Taxis become more reasonable. Other options emerge because yes, it's technically illegal, but it's better for the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. But are banks and politics too closely aligned to have that be an easy one to solve?
Well,
that's the key question.
Yeah, but I do think, for instance, like stablecoins have demonstrated that even if you don't have native yield in stablecoins, which I think will be a very difficult political battle, and I know that the guys are fighting over it, which I think is, honestly, you can capture that yield differently. I think it's it'll be unnecessary to fight over this, in my opinion. Having said that, stablecoins from a distribution standpoint are already a huge win if we can, if we get it out the way that it should be. Unbanked access, faster money transfers, all that type of stuff. And it will ultimately also move more money on chain, right? And so that's an example to me where innovation has progressed. Banks are not able to block it now. It's a reality. And even banks are now thinking, maybe we should do a stablecoin ourselves.
All right, guys. Last question, very, very fast. We've been going for 40 minutes, so I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Just good combo here.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It's great. Just a last question about like bringing it back to AI to close it out with AI. Do you have any advice, suggestions, comments on what founders, developers, people who are looking to start companies should do, and how they should incorporate AI? Is it just a general thing of just use it as much as you can, or do you have any particular insight into someone starting a company or getting into the space?
I think I don't necessarily look at AI as being like a separate thing, right? Because like we always sit at these panels and stuff like this, and then it's like, are you investing in AI? Are you investing in DeFi? Are you like? I don't really look at that.
Note
I
to
think
self,
it's very difficult to
don't
look
ask
at this
that question.
perspective because it's just it's a feature, right? It's you also don't ask me like, oh, what type of payment rail do you invest when you invest in fintech? It's like, no, it's just like it's a part of fintech, right? Versus AI is a part of a technical layer that can benefit consumer related apps, B2B products, government related services, almost everything, right? To certain degrees. And I think as a founder, I think you just have to number one, ask yourself like, what is the role of AI for your company, right? Are you building an LLM, or like are you doing something that's just enhanced with AI, right? Because I think it's a very difficult pathway of just using these type of buzzwords in order to make your company sound cool, in order to raise more capital from investors or whatever, even though like there's nothing really behind it, right? As I guess even our venture fund platform has AI. Am I an AI company? I'm not sitting here and be like, yeah, we launched an AI company that invests in, no, right? But it makes our life easier. It makes the filtering, it makes all these different things easier. And from a product perspective, I think founders have to be very creative, right? Because AI enables a lot of interesting tools. As an example, I talked to one company recently, and there's a couple of different players that are doing this right now. They're basically embedding or using AI to embed brands in movies and TV shows you watch. So for example, like let's say you watch a movie and the guy is holding a water cup, and then if you watch that would be maybe Coca-Cola because you like Coca-Cola, and for me maybe it's Pepsi because I'm a Pepsi fan, right? Or the guy walks into a bank and then for you it's JP Morgan, for me it would be like HSBC, right? Whatever it is. And then these things are evolving, right? And like that's a very powerful thing to do where like, you know, in this case, marketing isn't like, you know, someone stops the video and be like, hey, this video is sponsored by XYZ, right? Versus like it's just part of the video. Yeah. And I think that's how I see AI with businesses, right? It will be part of everything, and it will be for some companies a bigger part of what they're doing, and for some companies it will be a smaller part. But I think every company should use either internally from an operational perspective AI, or if it even helps the company to provide a better services to their clients, then that could also be enhanced through AI.
Yeah, I mean, just to complement, I mean, I think AI is just pervasive, right? It's kind of like, you know, people aren't talking about, are you using the internet? Are you using Instagram? Are you on TikTok? I mean, you kind of
Instagram company.
I'm gonna ask that next. I'm gonna on the conference floor. I'm gonna ask that. I'm gonna no, seriously. I'm gonna do a joke question. But excuse me, sir, are you using the internet?
Yes, right.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
good. We're internet first.
Yeah, exactly.
We're an internet first company.
Instagram integrated.
But you know, to that point, given some of the history, right? I mean, we used to talk about internet companies as .com companies, right? And that was the framing, and that's kind of how you say, are you an AI company? It's kind of like saying, are you a .com company back in the day? Everything basically will touch AI. But you know, speaking of founders who are looking to be in the space, I think there's one category of how am I using AI as tools, and there's the optimization and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, we'd have to look at how well you're using those tools, because you will know that you will lose against the one that uses it basically better than you, right? So let's call it the AI nativity, the ability to vibe code, the ability to basically optimize AI to your advantage is a skill that is important for a founder to have. It's no longer well, I'm super creative and you know, I hire a firm to do that. It has to be something you have to know, right? Otherwise, if you don't, you will lose against the ones that do, right? So that's one category. But the other category that we're excited about is all the framing and tooling that's needed for this agentic web, because it's not there, right? I mean, we've got LLMs, but they're still, you know, they've hit a certain limit, right? And now when you think of what happened with when Genie 3 came out, basically we've been looking at world models for a while, but they've really blew up the example of what world models can do. All the game stocks tanked for all the wrong reasons because people didn't understand how games are created. That said, it demonstrated basically what you can now do from a simulation standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, and there's an entire indexing space that's happening there that people don't understand. I mean, the most valuable companies in the early days of AI were actually tagging companies, right? All they did was tag, right? But they were basically tagging objects. Now you can basically sort of tag intent. You can tag much more than that in these world models. So all of this is evolving, and we're not saying we have all the answers, but we do want entrepreneurs to come to us and say, we're solving this problem for an agentic future. Interesting. Does it work? Does it not work? That's directionally towards the future. If you believe that AI agents are going to be everywhere and there's going to be swarms doing all sorts of stuff, what is that organizational layer that's needed? And so we do want those ideas. And so those who are doing it, we're not super interested in another LLM, right? But it depends on, again, what they're trying to solve. But generally speaking, there's so much infrastructure, so many pieces needed to make the agentic web a reality that I think there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything, but I look at it in sort of two different buckets, right? The first one is efficiencies, right? Like I think if you can take a look at how your company operates, and if you can have 10% more time a month from now, that's good. But what if you could have 15 the next month? And like to me, that's going to be a weird thing. And I saw this interview with the Abu Dhabi government, and the guy sat up there and he said, I want every government employee to have 1 billion agents. He didn't say 50 or 100. He said 1 billion agents. And I was like, okay. But I think that's where it's going on the efficiency side, right? And so this is like processes that drive outcomes, right? How can we make them more efficient? How can we get time back in the day? Like that's all cool. But that's kids play, if you ask me, right? The next level is how do we just drive the outcomes directly, right? And again, it blows the mind to even go there and think about it because it's not developed and the tooling's not there, and the infrastructure that's going to be needed behind that still is not. Like they're just trying to keep up with the compute power right now. But what about all the software that it's going to take to drive these sorts of things? That's the part that blows my mind. And at Aurum, we're focused on the finance piece of it, but that's just one little slice of the pie. And there's going to be a lot of different pieces of pie that people are working really, really hard on. And I think it's going to come together in a way that we can't even really imagine right now. And so I couldn't be more excited about where we're at today and in the sort of the evolution of technology, because like he said, the dot-com bubble, we used to call it, and it did burst actually. And Y2K and all our computers are going to go down because there's not enough digits in the dates. And, it didn't actually materialize, but the bubble did burst, and I think the same thing's going to happen here. Like there's going to be a clear winner maybe in LLMs, or in there's going to be a race to the bottom on some things, but then how do you use the ones that survived to sort of create these outcomes that you're looking for, not just help you with the processes to get there. So that's how I look at it.
Cool. I'm getting the feeling that I just asked a bad question, but your answers were really, really good. Just one comment though, I guess what I was trying to get at is I've talked to founders and people who work in like technology, and they provided LLMs, AI subscriptions to all their employees, and the usage, even in like high tech companies, was very small, right? And they were surprised at how little employees in their own tech companies were using AI, right? So they see the transformative power of it, but they were even having trouble getting people to adopt it. So anyway, that's kind of where I was going with it. Like
this is why we all said that everyone's underestimating it.
Yeah. And it's also habits, right? It takes time to break through habits. Like even if I give you something that's better, but you've done it like this for the last 5-10 years in this job, you're not going to be like the next morning I'm going to change everything, right? I mean, I used to live in Japan for a couple of years, and I had people that were putting numbers in Excel and then cross-checking on a calculator if Excel is correct.
We still use fax machines.
It's just like mind-blowing, right?
I think there's going to be another counterforce to that, right? Like if the supreme leader gives you 1 billion agents and you're not using them, good luck with that, or the CEO pays for a subscription and no one uses it. It's like there's going to be some reckoning there, I think, so.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. We're done. Thank you guys.